Ethiopia has just inaugurated the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, also known as GRED, the largest hydroelectric dam in Africa. Rising from the banks of the Blue Nile in the Guba district, this megastructure promises to transform Ethiopia's energy sector and electrify millions of homes. But the same project is also seen as a threat by Egypt and Sudan, countries that rely almost entirely on the Nile for survival. Construction of GERD began in 2011, employing more than 25,000 workers over more than a decade. The dam stands 170 meters, 550 feet high, and spans nearly 2 kilometers across the Blue Nile. It is capable of holding a staggering 74 billion cubic meters of water in its reservoir, an area so vast it has already submerged land larger than Greater London. When fully operational, GERD will generate 5,150 megawatts of electricity. That's more than double Ethiopia's current installed power capacity of around 4,000 megawatts. For perspective, this will make Ethiopia the largest power exporter in Africa, with potential to supply electricity not just domestically, but to neighbors like Kenya, Djibouti, and Sudan. Globally, GERD ranks among the 20 biggest hydroelectric dams in the world, placing Ethiopia on the map of major renewable energy players. The dam's construction cost is estimated at $4 billion. What makes GERD unique is how it was financed. Unlike many mega projects funded by international lenders, Ethiopia relied primarily on domestic resources. The National Bank of Ethiopia provided about 91% of the funding, while the remaining costs were covered by ordinary citizens who bought bonds or contributed through donations. This turned GERD into not just a state project, but a national symbol of pride. Yet, Ethiopia's pride has long been Egypt's nightmare. Egypt is home to over 100 million people, but receives little rainfall. The country depends on the Nile for 97% of its freshwater needs. For reference, the River Nile doesn't flow from north to south, but from south to north, emerging from Ethiopia and traveling to Sudan and then Egypt. For decades, Egypt has relied on treaties dating back to the colonial era that guaranteed it a dominant share of Nile waters. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has repeatedly called GERD an existential threat, warning that if Nile waters decline, Egypt's very survival will be at risk. Sudan's position is more complicated. On one hand, it has sided with Egypt in demanding a legally binding agreement on the dam's filling and operation. On the other, Sudan recognizes potential benefits, better flood management and access to cheap electricity from Ethiopia. The dispute has escalated beyond water. In recent years, Egypt has deepened military and political ties with Ethiopia's rivals, including Eritrea and Somalia. This has widened rifts in the Horn of Africa, with GERD serving as both a source of power and a point of division. Meanwhile, Ethiopia insists the dam is a sovereign right, pointing out that no international law forbids upstream countries from using their own resources. Despite fears, independent research shows that no major disruptions have yet been recorded in the flow of water downstream. This is partly because of favorable rainfall and partly because Ethiopia filled the reservoir cautiously over 5 years, timing it with the wet seasons. However, concerns remain about how GERD will operate during periods of drought. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is more than concrete, steel, and water. It is a symbol of ambition, pride, and sovereignty, but also a beacon of progress or a source of conflict will depend on diplomacy, cooperation, and compromise between neighbors who all rely on the Nile. The world will be watching closely, because the story of GERD is not just about water, it's about power, survival, and the future of Africa itself.